Some brands are legendary. In every category, someone sets the standard, and some companies create raving fans. Join Scott Wozniak and Caitlin Johnson of Swaz Consulting as we dig into the tactics and tools behind great organizations. How did the legends do it? And how can you become a legendary brand too? All right, Caitlin, I'm excited about diving into the last of the 3Cs, competence. If you haven't listened to the previous episodes, we highly recommend you pause right now, go back and listen to the other ones where we talked about a critical fact of hiring. So hiring is one of the most, maybe the biggest factor in operational excellence. Yeah, there's all sorts of other tools we can and will talk about and have talked about, but man, if you don't have the right people, it's just everything's harder. And so get the right people in the right seats, doing the work, and then all those tools actually work, you know? And hiring, we were challenging folks on, is not done as systematically or strategically. And the 3Cs, character, chemistry, competence. And today we are talking about competence.
Competence.
You know, we've said in the past, Caitlin, like this is the one most people do, but that doesn't mean
The
we're
default.
well, or we can't improve. And I've learned a lot in the last 10, 12 years on this one in particular. Let me say this. That was a very gracious way of saying I've made some big mistakes 10, 12 years ago that woke me up to like, this one kind of matters. You can't.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was like, yeah, you're an expert at this, Scott. But you know what? You become an expert because you work through failures.
Yeah, that's a really high motivation. When you blow it and all the fallout, you're like, let's not do that again. How do we figure this out? Yeah, you cannot assume they have the job skill they want. And so, listen, in the earlier episodes, I was adamant that if you can't get the perfect candidate, you have to train on something, that I would much rather train on competence than train on something like character. It's far easier to teach technical skills than it is to teach character and cause somebody to change their heart. And that whole debate, if you want to get into that, go listen to that episode, right?
Yes, absolutely.
But what we don't want to say here is that competence is not important and you don't need to test for it. Because, well, I've done this more than once. I won't name names. Well, for obvious reasons, as you'll hear, there have been 2 times I hired really nice people who were wonderful friends and gave it their best shot. And they did not pull the job off and we had to let them go. And it caused lots of pain and problems.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
The hiring was awful because it's like, you are actually giving this your best shot, right? I'm sorry, the hiring was great. The firing was awful.
The firing, yeah.
I'm like, you're giving your best shot. The hiring was so fun. We're going to do this and we'll figure it out. And they even told me like, well, I've never done that before. And you sure?
Yeah. And you're like, it's okay, right? We'll train you.
We're training people, right? We're development people. Yeah. What we do. Like I'm a leadership coach. Like, of course I will coach you. It'll be a part of the job. I'll walk through it with you. And they were growing and they were getting better, but they weren't growing fast enough or had gotten good enough. It was causing lots of client problems, staff problems, team members being like, I've asked him and he hasn't delivered and she did and he would and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And he's trying his best. And it's this horrible moment of like, you really are giving it your best shot. And I still like you as a friend and you're fired.
Yeah. So like there's a right level of gap that a person can have when it comes to competency to still be a good fit that you can train. So it's trying to identify the disparity, you know, how much space is in between that gap.
Right. Okay. And so how much, so the first part on the low end is like, do they have enough competence? Right. So I would say some of the competence that you want to test for is, how do I say this politely, but like the capacity to learn it, the wiring,
the willingness,
but even the intelligence, the expertise of like some of the work is technical or complicated or requires you to be able to hear nuances. And maybe a polite example that doesn't get down the weeds is if you're hiring somebody to be a music sound mixer in a studio and they're tone deaf. I'm sorry. I don't care how
such a random example, Scott.
But that's what it feels like sometimes, Caitlin. We're like, reading the room socially. Like if you're going to do some of the jobs we do where it's like, I'm going to do a interactive session with a CEO team. There's a certain amount of technical knowledge and there's a certain amount of emotional intelligence to read the room and notice like dude in the corner is fuming. And if we don't stop and deal with this, it doesn't matter how cool my answers are. And that's a nuance that I've found people who are tone deaf to. Like they just, I covered all the points. I was a successful consultant today.
Yeah.
Like,
check. Right.
No, you weren't, because you missed the fact that you lost the CEO halfway through the presentation because he was offended by something.
Yeah.
And so can you learn that? Maybe, but the time and the process to pick that up, or some of the work we do is very technical. It's like I've got a deep knowledge of all these things, and one of the this is not a scientific metric that we use, but we think about our consultants at a certain level, and one of the levels at the top level for us is like, could you leave them alone in the room with a CEO?
Yeah, and trust them, right? Absolutely.
Yes, and
Can
like
they manage that?
It. The CEO will walk away thinking, man, she was awesome. And we got to with her. And I've literally done that with you on projects like this year.
Yeah.
You probably get one where I'm like, Caitlin, I'm not feeling well. You got this meeting, right? Like, I'm just not even going to.
I totally got it, Scott. Yeah. No, and then I come back and I'm like, here's how it went. And here's how I identified new business, Scott.
So you can leave Caitlin alone in the room with the CEO and they'll call for more business, right?
Right.
And there are other people that good-hearted are just not at the level where life experience-wise, the CEO asked a hard question that's off script and they got nothing. They're like, and we're not going to do more work with those people. So that's competence. There is a certain minimum threshold. And so the first challenge is like, do you know what technical skills or people skills or thinking skills are required to pull the job off? And most job descriptions I've seen are way too vague. Yeah. It's the good people able to lead a team.
Right. Can micromanage or not micromanage. Sorry. Who wants to micromanage? Scratch that. Can multitask. That was the word I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, what you get is you ask multitask and you get micromanage, right? And you're like, wait a minute, why did this not happen? This guy's terrible to work with.
And
that's a big one I'll call out, right? Huge mistake we see is you take the best technician in the zone and you make the manager of the team, and that's a different skill set. And if you haven't defined what that means, the best salesperson should be the sales manager. Oh no. Oh, that's not the same skill set, right? The best developer should lead the development team. The best creative design person should be, no, actually, do they have those skills? Do you know what competent leadership looks like? And then that's when you get the micromanaging leader. They're like, oh, the best sales team is I jump on every sales call and tell people what to say and take over and do it all. Nope, that'll kill your team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not what leadership needs these days. That was probably the way, and I believe it was the way before us, how you got promoted, right? If you're really good at your technical role, then you became promoted and you led people. But leading people versus doing the technical role are two completely different skill sets.
Yes. And so competence in one doesn't mean competence in the other. And so what do you test? Do you know what competencies you're actually looking for? And do you test for them? So the first key piece we would say is you have to have enough competence to be able to pull off the job. Now, maybe that's like, I've done the job, but in a different industry.
Experience.
I led a small team and it went well. I think I could lead a large team. Or I've done this side project. I volunteered with my church or boys club, and this is the way I've done that kind of creative work over there. I think you want to look for some glimpses of it, but to borrow from financial advisors, right? The best predictor of future performance is past performance.
Yes, absolutely. So looking for those indicators to say, do they have enough to be able to do the basic foundational level of this job? And if there are some gaps and some disparity, could we train that? And would it be an easy train versus, that's going to take like 1-2 years for them to really kind of figure it out?
Yeah, easy train is a great phrase. I really like that, Caitlin, because technically everything's trainable, but some
Mhm.
might take 40 years to master, and
Right.
some things are
Yeah.
not, right? And so, yeah, one other layer that I'll add into this as we think about competence and training and build all this stuff up is that some of the best organizations I've been a part of, including Chick-fil-A headquarters and three or four others, their philosophy on promotions is that we recognize people who are already performing at that level. Now,
Mhm.
they do a lot of leadership development programs and opportunities for special side projects, and you got to give your people creativity to so they even can practice at the next level. But if you create that
Mhm.
kind of a entrepreneurial culture where people can do their own stuff and step up and lead, then
Right.
the ultimate competence test, and they're like, Caitlin has already been leading the team meetings, launched 2 initiatives. Why don't we just call her a director of whatever it is? Because she's literally doing the same stuff the other directors are. That's
Right.
the competence. That's the dream you want. Is like best predictor is past performance. Maybe the best predictor is current performance. Like
Uh-huh. Right.
the
Who's being
salesperson who's
proactive and
already
taking like,
mentoring other salespeople.
mhm.
Maybe that's the right person. Put her in charge of the sales team. So
Natural transition there, right? Yeah.
have
Mhm.
enough. That's important. But there's
Mhm.
also, I'm gonna put you on the spot because I know some of your story. Occasionally, we've both been in this place, but I'll make you go
Mhm.
first, where we had more than enough, and that could actually be a problem itself.
Right. Yeah. So far we've been talking about someone who might not have enough competence, and then can you easy train to get them where you need to go? But then the other side of it is somebody that has too much competence for the role and how that could
You
actually
got to unpack
backfire.
that because hold on, like too much excellence. Who's
Too
going to be
much
like,
excellence.
oh no, she's way too good at her job. That's offensive. What
Yeah.
do you mean by too much
Too
competence?
much. Well, first of all, I have to pull. There was a word you used in your book, and it was, sometimes managing the misfit, right?
Yeah.
And so I like the word misfit. If you break it into the two words, it kind of is joined to become where it is not the right fit for the job. And so if there could be the case if someone doesn't have enough competence, but then it can also be the case that it's a misfit for someone who is too skilled and above the capability of the role. And so I had a position in which I actually applied for that was below my competency level. But I was okay with that personally because I wanted a job that was interesting enough for me, but that didn't use all of my brain capacity because I wanted to build a business. And so, in order to create space for my side hustle, I took a job that was one or two tiers down below my capacity and my competence. Now, there was a really clever hiring manager that caught on to, I'm a little concerned that you're going to get bored in this role because you're brilliant and you have a lot to offer. And while I respected that, I did say, well, and here's why I'm going for this, and that's a gamble on my side because the hiring manager could be like, oh, yeah, we don't need somebody whose brain is in two different places.
Yep.
But she saw that I had the competence to be able to do the role and could take on more. And this might be a good balance for me, which it did end up being. I was in that position for 2 years while I was working on building my business. Now, I will say, though, there were many times I needed to remind myself of the strategy of why I took that job. Because, yes, it was driving me nuts. I wanted to lead the team instead of be, a contributor
Right.
on
Right.
the team. But, ultimately it worked. But I did need to remind myself that, Caitlin, that was strategic. You took something you knew you have more than. So stick to the
You did
plan.
this to yourself, right?
I
Like,
did. I
I
did.
chose this.
But yeah, but if I wasn't building a business and had other priorities, oh my gosh.
Mm.
And I knew 3 days in, it was going to be an interesting balance. 3 days. So imagine trying to stick it out for 2 years. That's a misfit.
Yeah. I've had that conversation with bosses multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, you have more capacity than this role requires. what are we doing? And that's actually why I started writing books many years ago now, is literally one of my mentors was like, he was my boss and still a mentor now. And he was like, maybe you should start writing some of those books you've talked about. Like the role is just not going to need more from you right now.
Right.
Your boss is doing a great job. His boss is doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
Still need this work done. And so like, if you, maybe you come up with something to do on the side, start a blog, write a book, do something.
Volunteer, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's volunteer opportunities where you can lead in tremendous ways. I also, during that period, is the first time I joined a nonprofit board and started thinking as a board member about strategic stuff. Great way to be strategic. And so, yeah, there are ways to manage that, but like, let's just own it. If you hire that, you have to manage that. In fact, yesterday, I was talking to a good buddy of mine who works for a major accounting firm, and they do a bunch of finance services, and fractional CFOs is one of the things that came up.
Okay.
And talking a bit about, he's like, actually, because I said, well, maybe some companies I work with, let's talk about it. And to his credit, he said, actually, I don't think they need a CFO. He says, we see this all the time, small to mid-sized companies. And by the way, his definition of mid-size was 250 million or less. So, yeah, big boy. He's like, the little guys. He's like, most of them don't, until you clear $100 million in revenue, you probably don't need a proper CFO. And if you have a fractional CFO or full-time CFO, you're probably overpaying for stuff you don't need.
Interesting.
And they're not actually a real CFO at the high level, or they're happily taking money from you that you should be paying. Like at that level, he said. So maybe I'm wrong here. I'm not a CPA like he is, but he's like, at that level, you might want a guy to pop into your quarterly board meeting once in a while for strategy, and then you just need a really high level controller accountant. A true CFO doing financial strategy, so the reason I'm bringing that up is like, if you're a small company and you're thinking, we're going to grow and I'm going to hire a true like rock star CFO, it's a waste of money. You're spending for stuff that's not actually producing value for your business. And it's just going to be frustrating to them. A proper CFO will be like, there's nothing here for me to do. Like, you guys,
so then they're underutilized.
Yes.
And that's a whole different problem too, right? Like if your employee, we're going into retention conversations now at this point, because you're going to lose that person if they don't feel like they're being fully utilized.
Yeah, it's a real thing. Now, there's some unique ways to solve this. I'll give you one creative thing that we did. I say we did. I didn't do this, but I was a part of the strategic conceptual conversation. So Chick-fil-A is 100% franchised. And so the headquarters doesn't run the locations. There's some things they do like menus, right? But there are some things only the franchisees can do, and the headquarters doesn't do it all. And one of those is the people stuff. Who you hire, how you structure your teams, kind of the training of those teams on that stuff. With the exception, of course, for the menu, we get to say what the menu requirements are when you're the franchisor. But the practical implementation and building of the team is not. So, one of the challenges for Chick-fil-A, and this might relate to some people who are on the podcast listening, so maybe this will connect to you. It's not just about the food. They are actually significantly bigger than everyone else in their category, the revenue size. I mean, massively. Give you quick numbers, like in the fast food chains in the US, the successful ones, on the low end, you're going to get $900,000 to $1 million a year in annual revenue. It's places like lots of little locations, right? In the middle of the bell curve is going to be like 1.6, maybe 1.7 million a year. That's going to be places like Taco Bell, Arby's, stuff like that, right? Okay. Then you get to the more successful ones on the bell curve are going to be McDonald's, 2.3, 2.4 million per location, annual revenue, right? The Chick-fil-A average freestanding location, last I checked, was over 8 million per location.
Holy cow. Okay. So if you're listening to me, you did not see my eyeballs, but
they about smacked into the screen. They came so far out of her face.
Yeah, that's a significant difference.
Okay, so they need, and then some of these guys, I mean, running a location could have 200, 250 staff members. And so they need like college or similar level of professionalism experience, like, military officers and MBAs. And I mean, like, we're running a decent, and some of these guys have 2 locations. And so, and the bigger, that's average. Some of the bigger ones are in the neighborhood of like 10 to 12 per. And so you could have a $25 million business that's a fast food joint. And so what you find is like, the best candidates, I mean, just to be blunt, they don't want to work in fast food, right? Like there's a stereotype in the US. It's like, we make jokes.
Fast food's hard.
Yes. And you joke people like their dead end careers flipping burgers, making fries.
Fry guy. Right.
And so the actual industry requires serious professionals and creativity, and it's hard work. And then you had Chick-fil-A, they're doing it at scale, and you could lead leaders who lead leaders. I mean, it's like hundreds of people reporting to you. So how do you get the best talent? And one of the ways they found is to own the fact that they can get rock star talent knowing they're only going to get them temporarily. And so they get these folks typically in college as a part-time job, and then they hire them full-time, and they make a leadership development program out of it. When I left Chick-fil-A, this is one of the first projects I was a part of since I was no longer a franchisor. We helped design a lot of these programs. They're like 2.5 year rotational programs where we're going to get a rock star, and star is going to join. Caitlin's awesome, but we know that Caitlin is not going to stay with us for the rest of her career. In fact, some of the most amazing leaders I know work for Chick-fil-A, but some of them are like, I have a grand dream to go do my own thing. I'll give you 2.5 years because you'll take a 22, 24-year-old, and depending on whether they get out of grad school or undergrad, and then we'll put you in a leadership position over multi-million dollars and give you the chance to lead something meaningful. And at the end of 2.5 years, we'll even help you launch to the next career, introduce you to people in our network, and help you get your next job. It's like a tour of duty in the military.
Yeah.
All of that, Caitlin, is to solve the problem. We need highly competent people, but the very best people may not want to stay in this role very long. Because if you just say you're a rock star, spend the next 40 years in this run restaurant, they'll probably say no. Now, some people get called to that industry, and it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, managing the tension between how much competence and not enough competence, we actually ended up calling the idea that it's an escalator. They're going to get on, go for 2.5 years up, and we're going to grow you, and then they're going to step off the escalator. And what our job is to feed the escalator so that when they step off, there's somebody behind them to step up. You always have rock star leaders, and you just find Caitlins who want to build their own stuff and say, hey, we'll help you. It's a really interesting play, but if you don't design something explicitly for that kind of competence, that kind of leader is not ever going to come work for you.
How interesting. That is a really clever, well-oiled machine in kind of identifying how to find and grow the right talent with the right competency.
Well, and this is true of them. And I would maybe say every business. It's not really about the food. It's about the leaders. If you find and develop the right leaders and you put them in the right spot, then all the other things are going to happen. The competence is not a bonus feature. It's one of the 3 C's. And yes, it is often the easiest one to train, but I have been burned and created a lot of problems for my customers and my staff by getting good-hearted people who were not the right fit. I will use your use of my use of the word misfit.
Right.
Misfit is a good, like if they're not the right fit, if they are a misfit. Competence, it doesn't matter how nice they are. This is the difference between your organization and a group of friends hanging out at a party. You have a mission to accomplish. And maybe we'll close with this, Caitlin. This is this happened to be a Chick-fil-A. We did a lot of fun Chick-fil-A stuff here at the end. One of my favorite quotes from Truett Cathy. Truett was the founder of Chick-fil-A. And when I first went there, he was still working there. And I got to be a part of his final years working at Chick-fil-A. To work directly with him. Super cool. So Truett said this, and I'm going to try to get this right because I don't have it written down in advance. It just occurred to me. But it's a 2-part quote. And I think I put both parts together, and that's how you get the power. He said, Every person is more important than their job, but no person is more important than the mission.
Oh, yeah.
So every person's more important than their job. Listen, you matter as a human being. You're not just a means to an end. We care about you. If you're having a bad day, we're going to work with you. Your humanity is more important than any task we're going to assign to you.
Yeah, it makes me think people versus pawns.
Yes.
Right?
They're actually human beings we care about. However, we're on a mission here. And just because you have value as a human being doesn't mean that you may actually contribute to our mission. And if you can't contribute to the mission, then maybe you need to go find a mission you can contribute to. And we're not going to sacrifice the mission of this organization to make sure you feel better. We're going to try to treat you like a good human. Again, that's why you need both halves of this, right? Either half by itself, and I think you can get unhealthy. But we're talking today about the second half is like, treat them with dignity and respect and honor them. But if they're not actually contributing to the mission in a meaningful way, I mean, this is what happened to me. They were great people and we all loved them. But at the end of the day, they were costing us time, energy, and money, and were keeping us from doing our mission.
Right.
And then you don't have something that's a win for everybody. Competence.
And that's why competence is important.
Yes. If you enjoyed this episode, you might want to sign up for our weekly newsletter. It's all new content with the same themes. You can subscribe for free and learn more about how we partner with our clients to build legendary companies at swozconsulting.com. That's www.swozconsulting.com. And if you want to get access to the actual tools and techniques that we use with our elite consulting clients, check out our online program at legendarybrandsacademy.com. That's www.legendarybrandsacademy.com. Greatness is possible. You just have to build the right engine.